J. Warner Wallace is a cold case detective who has solved a significant number of cold case homicides and has noted a couple things about expert witnesses. First, attorneys don't want experts in the field on the jury because they can taint the decision-making process. The Greek philosopher Horace said, "Nullius addictus jurare in verba magistri." Be skeptical of the experts. And then, number two, each side will be given the opportunity to present their expert witnesses to a jury that has no specific expertise in whatever the scientific area being addressed is, and they are the ones who decide on the credibility of those witnesses. The premise is audiatur et altera pars, let both sides be fairly heard. It's a strong principle in Western law. For students of Latin, please forgive my poor attempt at the original language, but the points are important. More than 60 years ago, native Pennsylvanian Rachel Carson, and author of the radical environmentalist manifesto Silent Spring, wrote, "We stand now where two roads diverge." In 2025, Carson's statement accurately reflects the current state of Pennsylvania's regulatory affairs, but which fork in this road will today's state policymakers decide to take? Will they embrace the overwhelming evidence that economic prosperity and real environmental progress are not mutually exclusive? Or, just like Governors Wolf and Shapiro, will they travel down the carbon tax imposing, overregulated highway that will continue to self-destruct Pennsylvania's economy? To expound on truthful answers to these questions and more, I'm pleased to welcome Gregory Whitestone to today's Mission Report podcast. Greg, can I call you Greg?
Absolutely.
All right. Greg is a Pennsylvania native, another Pennsylvania native, and best-selling author of Inconvenient Facts, the science that Al Gore doesn't want you to know, and A Very Convenient Warming, how modest warming and more CO2 are beneficial to humanity. With over 40 years of experience as a world-recognized geologist, Greg presently serves as executive director of the CO2 Coalition in Arlington, Virginia. And by the way, Greg, you also had an excellent article, I think it was in City and State or Broad and Liberty, I'm not sure which, but editorial on exactly where we are in Pennsylvania. And what I'd like you to do, Greg, is Earth Day is upon us. Please arm our audience with some inconvenient truths about the biggest hypocrisies and apocalyptic predictions surrounding so-called man-made climate change.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. And yes, things have changed quite dramatically. I've seen it coming over the last several years, but now it's gaining speed. And over the last 2 months, we've seen just a quantum shift back. We were facing strong headwinds, fighting this climate and non-existent climate crisis. And now I don't just feel it. We've got the wind at our backs, and it's a gale force wind. Just almost every day, something new, really good happens, whether it's an executive order from Mr. Trump or Lee Zeldin at EPA taking on the climate crazies again. So it's really a good time. The last we spoke, I testified, I believe, in front of your Senate organization, Energy Committee here some time ago. And that was after I published my first book, Inconvenient Facts. That book was driven, I was driven to write it because of my personal search for the truth. And that personal search, what I found actually angered me greatly. I found out that much of what we were being told by the so-called experts was just incorrect. The science, the facts, and the data did not support many or virtually any of the climate crises that they're telling us are going on right now and will only get worse. And so now we've evolved a little bit with this new book. From the title, you can grasp that we've gone beyond there is no climate crisis to the fact that by almost every metric we look at, Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering. And it's due to the combination of modest warming and more CO2. From the near polar regions to the equator, vegetation is just going gangbusters. It's exploding. Crop growth is, of course, being a vegetate part of the plant world. Crops are benefiting hugely, breaking records year after year. And we see that in Pennsylvania as well. with corn and sorghum and soybeans, all of them, again, breaking records year after year. And so we tout what I talk about too. I call it the greatest untold story of the 21st century, that of a thriving Earth and the many benefits that we're seeing that are accruing to the human condition because of climate change. And it's completely at odds with what you're being told. And I think my job was made a little bit easier by the revelations during the COVID crisis, where many of your or viewers realize in hindsight that the experts were often wrong. And now if in COVID those experts were wrong, well, what about the other things they're being told? There was a consensus on many things in COVID, but we found it just wasn't so. And we have the same thing on steroids with the climate change debate. And these people, they rely one of the big things we hear is there's a 97% consensus. Well, you're the only ones out there saying it. You're going against the consensus of scientists. Well, number one, there really isn't a consensus that we see at all. And number two, that's not how science is done. Michael Crichton, the famous Michael Crichton, author of Jurassic Park and many others, Climate of Fear, his great quote was, "Consensus is not science, and science is not consensus." My favorite quote, though, is the Nobel laureate winning physicist John Feynman, who said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." Think
Absolutely.
about that. I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. And that's what we have in this climate change debate. They're telling this is the answer. You dare not say anything against that. You must be silent. And that's what they do is they silence us. Because me,
And
my
can I
colleagues in the
interject one thing
CO2,
here?
huh?
One of the things that really has frustrated me, being a former law enforcement officer, being in front of Her Majesty's Crown Court, military and civil tribunals, uh, and watching experts from two different sides being allowed to make their arguments. And then you've got a jury pool that is not made up of those people deciding which one's going to have credibility. Now, in law, when you're before the court or you're before the bar of the court, you're looking for truth. That's the ultimate end game with going before the court. And whether it's the bar of the Court of Common Pleas or the Supreme Court, whatever, or the bar of public opinion, you need to have both sides of an argument presented. And when there are forces at work to prevent one side from being expressed, truth is not served, number one, and it only serves to give power instead of authority. It gives power. There's a difference between power and authority. Power is something that is exercised with no governing influence. Authority is when one acts, you're in a position of authority and responsibility, and one acts under the color of law, under the cover of that authority. And we're seeing way too many people either getting involved with government or even within the media for the purpose of exercising power over people. And that what you've done, and what I love about both of your books, this one in particular, and we discussed this right before we came on. The chapter 3 in this book, it's called "A Very Convenient Warming." Chapter 3. If you've never delved into this, one of the things that Greg was just discussing was the current benefits. And I'd like to let you continue on that. But I think if people start seeing the benefits, it might get them to go back and read chapters 1 and 3. But anybody that's been involved with this for a while, it's a good opportunity to start chapter 1. But I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, that's fine. That's really our mission here at the CO2 Coalition. And just before we get into that, let's just, if I could just take a few minutes to tell you about the CO2 Coalition.
Oh, certainly.
So we're nearly 200 of the top experts and scientists in the world. We have astronauts. We've got a Nobel laureate in physics. We have some of the top physicists of all time that are leading our group on our board. They're a resource I tap early and often for the correct facts. And I'm really proud to lead this group. One of our board members is Dr. Patrick Moore, who I think you're familiar with him. He was a co-founder of Greenpeace, and
Yep.
he left them, and he now sits on our board of directors. That's right. A co-founder of Greenpeace sits side by side. In fact, he hired me and believes as I do. And we also have 2022 Nobel laureate John Clauser sits on our board. Dr. William Happer, he should have a Nobel Prize himself for atmospheric physics research, and he invented the guide star laser during the Reagan administration, their Star Wars program. He's an unsung hero of that whole era. He designed the lasers that we were going to use to shoot down incoming Russian missiles, and he figured out how to do it. He should have gotten a Nobel Prize for that, but his position on climate change prevents that. He'll never get it, but even though he earned it. So, yeah, we have the benefits are many. One of the unofficial mottos we have at the CO2 Coalition is we love CO2 and so should you. And we promote the very real fact that there is no climate crisis. In fact, we have friends that own a billboard company that we put up billboards on the Pennsylvania Turnpike a couple of
I've
times.
seen them.
Yeah, I think you might have seen it. It's a woman resting comfortably on a pillow, sleeping, and it says, "Sleep well, there is no climate crisis." And so, again, we've moved beyond that there is no climate crisis, to sleep well. Life is good and getting better for the citizens of Pennsylvania and the citizens of America and the world. And we should celebrate that. And so,
Absolutely. Our growing season is extended now here in Pennsylvania. And what we're seeing in like the Sahara is shrinking and people starting to raise crops. And it's likely we'll start just like we did when Leif Erikson was in Greenland. They'll be able to start raising crops up there again. But
yeah, and if we look at, well, they are raising some crops, but the one crop in particular on Greenland that Leif Erikson grew was barley, which has a short growing season or a longer growing uh, season that's needed than what they have now. It's too cold to grow barley there. So it was warmer at that time at that place. Uh, and if we look at, you talked about warming and growing season, a lot of people that go, well, warmer temperatures, more heat waves is going to be bad for agriculture, and it's not. If you look at it in the continental United States, growing season has lengthened by more than 2 weeks since 1900. That's a really, really, really good thing. Think if you're in Adams County or Franklin County, you've got an apple grow. You have an apple orchard, and that's what you're doing. You're growing apples and pears. And what do you fear the most? You fear a late spring killing frost. That'll ruin it'll ruin your year. Because of a lengthened growing season, the killing frosts stop earlier in the spring and arrive later in the fall. So we have fewer of those catastrophic events for the fruit orchards. You're able to get more plantings in. You can an extra uh, reaping or so of hay if you're in Cumberland County, wherever you might be with. And I used to bale hay at my grandfather's farm, Silver Spring Township of Cumberland County. I hated it, but it was, it was. It's agriculture is a big product in Pennsylvania.
sure, in the 60s, we were getting 2 cuttings a year. Now we're getting 3.
Yeah, and that back when I was young, of course, they didn't have the round bales. Those were the rectangular bales that were heavy and they weighed more than I did. So it was tough to get them up on the hay wagon, but that's another story. So we have these things that are going on that are benefiting the warmth. If we look in the second section of the book, I'm sure you've seen that, is the strong relationship. It's one of my favorite subjects, is the strong relationship between human history and temperature history. And we're being told We dare not let it get any warmer, or it's going to be all over. But that's not what history tells us. History tells us that warming is better, and the warmer it is, the better for humanity. They in over the last 4,000 years or so, if we go back to the first great civilizations, the Hittites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Harappan Empire, and the Indus River Valley, all these great empires rose up during a really, really warm period. It was called
Yes.
the Minoan warm period of the Bronze Age. And people thrived, food was bountiful, and then it started getting cold. And it got cold fairly quickly. And they think within as short a period as 50 to 100 years, all of those empires collapsed. And it was
Mm.
because along with the cold came crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. And it was a global event related to the onset of the cold. It was called the Greek Dark Ages, and it was horrific. Would again warmed up during the Roman warm period, the time of Jesus. And again, food was bountiful, life was good. And we see this repeated time and time again, warming, much warmer than it is today, great for the human condition, cold, really bad. Uh, and so the warming trend that we're in right now, the last great cooling period was called the Little Ice Age, and it went from about 1250 to 1850. And it started warming. The warming trend we're in right now started more than 300 years ago, and it's been warming again for more than 300 years. But again, the first 200 plus years of that were at a very low carbon dioxide period, very low. We're being told that human emissions of carbon dioxide or CO2 are driving unusual and unprecedented amounts of warming that's harming the planet, harming the plants, harming agriculture, creating uh, more toenail fungus, whatever it is. They have a whole litany of these things that's worse. And but that the warming again started 200 plus years before we started uh, adding
Yeah.
before Ford rolled out off the first Model T off the assembly line. We also knew we can look at glacial records. My wife and I were up. If you know my book, I've shot. I've
I
got a
saw
picture
that, the
of my
picture.
wife. We were standing on top of the Mendenhall Glacier, 1,000 feet or more below us. The glacier is retreating, yes, but 1,000 feet below us are mature trees that were covered up by the glacier 1,000 years ago, and well, it had to have been a lot warmer. It was a mature forest, and now
Right.
there's 1,000 feet of ice on top of this what was once a mature forest. And we
Well,
said
and
that too, going up into Glacier Bay. We took the tour up through there, and the captain came on, and this glacier has retreated 90 miles, and this is just proof of global warming. Well, yeah, it is, but it's not human caused global warming because it started retreating in the late 1700s. And
yes,
almost 90% of the retreat of that glacier began before we started adding a lot of CO2 to the atmosphere. So
that's
almost,
actually one of the things in that book, that image that you had. It showed the recession of the glacier by the year starting around 1760 and then going up. And it's just that final little bit up there at the top of the receding is from the modern era. And
yeah.
this thing going back hundreds of years. So that I think that if people see that, that can pique an interest and okay, get them to ask the question, well, okay, if most of this happened over hundreds of years and we're just at a point where it's uh, receding now, it might be receding a little bit more quickly, but that even ebbs and flows with the climate change even over a couple hundred years.
And people look at that too, just not that, but if they read some of these things that I expose in the book, they will also say, well, if they're lying to me about this, what else are they lying to me about?
Exactly.
This is so easily exposed. And people, I want people to make up their own minds. I want to give them the facts and the data, and you decide. You decide. Look at my chart on forest fires in the United States. The one by the
Yeah.
government that's released starts in 1983, and they blow up the y-axis. It looks like a terrible increase in fires. But they don't show all the data. They have data going back to 1926 that they hide diligently. And that data shows that in the 20s and 30s, there were 5 times as many fires as we have today. And there was 5 times the area burned than what we have today.
And
And
for
so,
those of you who are watching and listening, this is one of the things that Greg's bringing up, and it's not just with the forest fires. There are a number of areas in this book where he brings out the scientific evidence that's been out there that goes back thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of years, and that where, like with the glacial measurements and stuff like that, all these things are being hidden from you. Why? And the facts are there. The people who have had that science or that data are acknowledged to have been experts within their field of study, but we're not allowed to see that. And that's where, like you said, Greg, people need to see that and just start asking. It's not just one thing. Well, why? What else are they hiding from us? And then you go on to expound on a number of things where that data has been hidden from us.
yeah, and they've got, for example, there are often claims of increasing death and mortality, heat-related mortality. And let's first look at heat and heat waves. And I looked at that for Pennsylvania and across the United States, but almost everywhere I look, heat waves peaked 80 and 90 years ago, back in the 20s and 30s. Huge spike in heat waves, terrible. In today's heat waves, if you go to the EPA website, this is a good example. If anyone watching this, just search for these words, EPA and heat waves, and you'll find a chart on the. Lee Zeldin has to change this. He's got to get rid of it tomorrow or today. But it's called heat wave index United States. It's nothing of the sort. It's a heat wave index, and it's in the United States, but it's the top 50 metropolitan areas in the United States. And what that is, these urban areas have what's called the urban heat island effect, uh, and it's the result of asphalt, concrete, exhaust from airplanes, exhaust from vehicles, exhaust from air conditioning units, all of these things serving to artificially increase greatly the temperature within urban environments. We can see some of these cities, most notably Washington, D.C., Delhi, India, some of the big cities in India can see 10 degrees Celsius or more, which is about 15 degrees Fahrenheit increase of temperature in the inner city compared to the rural areas
Yes.
outside. And so what they're doing, they took this urban heat island index and called it heat index for the United States. It's nothing of the sort. If and so they don't show their original EPA. The original, if you looked 5 years ago, there was a good chart showing data going back to the early 1900s and a huge spike of heat waves in the 20s and 30s, and very little today. And so
Well, what's
not
interesting too is those heat islands, air, because pilots needed data on the when we first started flying, they needed to get accurate weather data for what they were flying into and that sort of thing. And all these airfields that where they were taking that and transmitting the information by telegraph or whatever, they were grass strips. Now these same places where they have these stations for the weather reporting, they're sitting in a sea of concrete that is absorbing all that solar radiation and heating, and that radiates in turn back out to those monitoring stations and skews the data. And then you, in your book, one of the things that I was astounded, how many was it again, the number of data stations where they're now just predicting what it is because the data stations aren't up anymore?
Yeah, they're not when they start these data stations quit reporting data for one reason or another, and they're just fabricating the data and putting it in there. Well, this is what it should be. If it was still reporting, this is what it would report. That's one of the ways. And we look too at the adjustments made by NOAA. We need to go back through and expose these people for this. and they're using adjusting the data from about 1980 or and earlier. The adjustments cooled the data, and from 1980 on, the adjustments just happened to warm the data. So what that does, the adjustments made exaggerate any modern warming we see. But even so, if we look at the best records we have, which is the United States Historic Climate Network data, it's still compromised, but still I like to use it, even though I tell in the book, I say this data is compromised and this is the reason. So keep that in mind. But that data is thermometer-based data, goes back to 1895 and before. And so we can use that, even though, again, it's compromised a little bit. We can use that to show, well, okay, here's the average temperature, median temperature for that day. We can also go maximum temperature. Both of these are very important. Maximum temperature for the day, which is usually late afternoon. And then we have the minimum temperature for the day, which it's not always, but almost always at night. And what we find in Pennsylvania, I haven't updated it for a couple of years, but as you know, we published a report pushing back against the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And yeah, we looked at that and we found that the key component was the warming in Pennsylvania was driven by increasing warmth of the coldest temperatures, if you follow me. So
Yeah.
instead of it being 22 degrees Fahrenheit at 3 a.m. in the morning on January 24th, it was instead of 22, it's now 18 degrees. So it's a few degrees warmer. And what that does is that's important again for agriculture because it affects the frosts that end earlier in the spring, arrive later in the fall. And we also see the maximum temperatures really aren't increasing. And again, in Pennsylvania, we saw a huge increase back 80, 90 years ago in heat waves. We took a look at the percentage of the stations that were 100 degrees Fahrenheit or more and found out that what we see today is pretty similar to what we saw in the early 1900s. And so
Yeah,
there's,
well, that evening temperature change, when you have those buildings and everything else absorbing all that heat and becoming a heat sink, they're radiating that off. They've absorbed a lot more than the trees will convert that through photosynthesis into more material, but that's all radiated back out immediately where or absorbed and turned into energy for the plant. But when it's in that heat sink and it raises the evening temperature because it's got to cool, the building's got to cool down. If you stand next to a building in the evening that's been baking in the sun for the last 4 hours of the day, you can feel the heat radiating off of the building.
yeah, well, let's talk about temperature right now since we're there. What we're being told by the climate alarmists like John Kerry and Al Gore and all the rest of these climate bedwetters, they're telling us we dare not let temperature get to 1.5 degrees centigrade above what it was at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, well, it's already warmed 1.2 degrees. Okay,
Right. We're half a
so
degree from there.
so what they're talking to you about is 3/10 of a degree centigrade. That's half a degree Fahrenheit. Think about it. That's what they're telling us. If temperatures rise another half a degree Fahrenheit, it's game over. The jig is up. Humanity is gone. Just shoot yourself now because it's all over. Half a degree Fahrenheit. It it increases, the temperature increases between 11 a.m. and noon almost every single day by half a degree Fahrenheit. If you're that worried about it, move 17 miles farther north. If you're living in
Right.
Chambersburg and you're worried about a half a degree Fahrenheit warming, move to Mechanicsburg. It'll be half a degree cooler, the average temperature. It's
You know, you brought up
ridiculous.
Al Gore and John Kerry. Another one that you and I had to deal with,
Michael Mann.
Professor Mann. You know, what's funny is that hockey stick graph that he came up with I started in the legislature a little over 10 years ago. That stick is from over 10 years ago. It was a joke back then. It's a joke now. Uh, the stuff, because all these predictions that they had made for where we'd be now, they weren't, well, even prior to that. And that's one of the reasons why the joke with the hockey stick was the fact that the predictions that Professor Mann made years before hadn't come to fruition. And now we're a decade later, and we're still not close to all the devastation and the droughts, the famines, all these different things that they were predicting. None of it's come about. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me, or you, fool me twice, shame on me. A lot of people are waking up to the fact that they're not going to be fooled again.
Yeah.
And
that
largely
hockey,
because of the work that you're doing and Professor 𝐈𝐫𝐲 and some others.
yeah, it's that hockey. Well, our memories are sometimes weak, and I'm not going to accuse you of that. Well, okay, I am.
Okay.
But it was 36 years ago. He published the hockey stick
Yeah.
paper in 1998 and 99. So, it's been around. He's been wrong for 36 years. He's still wrong. And thank God the courts finally caught up with him. And in fact, my next book will be on this. I can't tell you that it's about done. And it I can't wait to get it out. The timing is everything. So I'd like to get that out and published. So yeah, he's just one of these scientists that have used their position, have lied and manipulated the data and made a lot of money at it. You have to look and say, well, why are all these people doing this? Well, it's because if your salary depends on towing the company line, then you're not going to be very brave. Apparently, there aren't many very brave scientists out there. There are some, and but not enough. More and more, I think, are coming to the front, and they'll be emboldened, hopefully, by this new Trump administration. Number one, their funding is getting cut off, a lot of it, at least the
Yes.
government funds. I'm sure Bill Gates and the others, Forbes, Gates, the Tides Foundation, they'll continue throwing billions of dollars at this climate crisis nonsense until they're losing at this point. We are winning and winning bigly in terms of getting this message out to the general population. And that's why what you're doing here is really important and allowing us and if you want to have, we've got a whole raft of just really interesting and talented scientists that can tell a really good story. And so if you need another entertaining and informative person, I can line some up for you.
I'd be happy to have them. It's funny. The Heritage Foundation years ago, is it David did so?
Craig.
Craig.
And his dad would, yeah. Mhm.
The works where he's gone out and done the compilation of all the different studies, this garbage about scientific consensus. You had said about Michael Crichton's thing on consensus. It's very true. Thousands of studies that mitigate or completely refute a lot of the stuff that they've been the people like Al Gore and others have been putting out there, and it's all peer-reviewed stuff. And the science is there that yes, we do have global warming going on, but it's cyclical. There are things that it's almost every 800 years or so we see a new warming period, and at least over the last 4,000 years. So
Yeah,
I think scientists, well, my point in that was that I think scientists are actually now, especially like you mentioned with Lee Zeldin and President Trump and others, I believe that they're going to have more of a spine, more of a willingness to step out and start talking about this stuff.
Yeah, we had a scientist. He was an engineer, actually, chemical engineer that was working in the carbon capture industry, and he'd written papers on it and spoken at various conferences. And he came to me. He read our paper that was written by Dr. Lindzen and Dr. Happer and Steve Kuhn and Dr. Kuhn. It was called Challenging Net Zero, where in it they took it apart systematically. And he read it and it opened his eyes. And he never really looked into this. He read it, he did a deep dive and found out that he was working for the wrong people. And he called me up. He says, "I want to come work for you." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to hire a carbon capture guy." You know, he wouldn't let me alone. Finally, he called back. He says, "I really want to come work for you. I quit my job." He quit his job. He couldn't. He didn't want to live a lie. He
He has a conscience.
realized he was working for Emperor Palpatine. He wanted to come work for Luke Skywalker, and so I had to hire the guy. So he's now one of our science and research associates. He's living in Houston, but there aren't many brave scientists and brave engineers like Dr. Soipian. And I just hired another fella just a couple of weeks ago that's got a PhD in quantum and theoretical physics that he's going to hopefully be leading some of our scientific efforts. Because we are a science, we stick to the science and stay out of the politics. And I think that's done us great good because we can stay above the fray and people are coming now and the government are coming to us, seeking us out because they know we have done that. We have stuck with the science and we're not being political.
Well, and it's sad that it's been brought into the realm of politics because, I mean, part of the reason I got into this was to defend the people that are now my constituents, but I'm a bit of a geek, so I'm willing to go in and dive into this stuff and the things that they were saying, the first thing that came to mind when all this stuff was going on, I mean, I study history. I was aware of what happened up in Greenland to some extent. I went and further educated myself on it. And then the Roman warming period and that history that you cover in chapter 2 of the book really makes the case. And I kind of liken you to the lawyer before the jury in that with this book because you're presenting the side that I see as being the truthful side, while and Al Gore and all those guys with the collusion of the media and everybody else, they've been making their case for decades. And it's folks like you, and you're putting this in plain English, and you're giving some really good things, directions to point people so that they can study. And then there'll be some who will geek out like me and want to get into the more heavy duty stuff. But they'll that's the thing I love about this book. You're helping to wake the people up in a way that, and you're doing it just when an attorney is making the case and he's got his expert, he's got to guide the expert to the point where he can make the case so that the jury can understand it. You've done that here, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much. That's really good to hear. I'm glad. That was my goal, was to write this an understandable. We succeeded, I think, in the first book and this book, and
Yes,
presenting the science in an understandable way without dumbing it down too much. And so if you're working in the area and you're at an auto store, you can pick this book up and working there. Pick it up and you can read it, you can understand it, and you can arm yourself
absolutely.
with facts. And that's really our goal is we need to preach to the choir. We need to educate those who are a lot of the people we find don't believe what's happening, but they don't know, they don't have the data like you find in this book to do
Right.
it. And that's good. And there's something else here that I'd like to get to before we finish up, and that's our educational component. In terms of in 2022, our members came to me and said that they were really concerned about the state of science education in America. And you can see back here, that's me and my granddaughter and I was reading, she was reading it to me, first book we published, which was Once Upon a Time, the true story of the miracle molecule CO2. And so we're able to use these books, wonderfully illustrated by our Brazilian artist, Tiago Hellinger. The latest book I authored it actually, was Chloe the Clownfish Sleeps Well. And it's the story of a clownfish that named Chloe that lives on the Great Barrier Reef, and was told at school by Dr. Moray Eel, the visiting professor, that her home was in great danger and she couldn't sleep. And it was, so I collaborated with Dr. Peter Ridd of Australia, who was fired from James Cook University for telling the truth about the Great Barrier Reef, by the way. Oh, and by the way, and he was fired for telling the truth. That's what happens when you do that. And so we collaborated. We've got this book. It's wonderfully illustrated. It just became available last week on Amazon. Um, we've put together a whole series. We have a standalone website. If you're homeschooling, that's co2learningcenter.com, co2learningcenter.com, to get free. Our mission here is to provide materials, be it a charter school, homeschool, public schools, maybe if they'll go that way. Maybe one day we'll be able to get this into the public schools. And we prepare lesson plans that are prepared by our senior education advisor, Dr. Sharon Camp, who is a PhD in chemistry. She was an AP science teacher and still an AP reader of science. So these are supremely qualified individuals creating these books, creating the lesson plans, and we're on a mission. We've got some 20 of just astounding. These are mostly PhDs and highly, highly qualified individuals that have this concern about their children, and actually their grandchildren, in some cases their great grandchildren, about them being indoctrinated into a climate cult. They're being taught groupthink. They're being taught consensus science, and they're not being taught the scientific method, or they're not being told how to use critical thinking to solve problems. And so it's a tough goal, but we've embraced it, and we think we're making great progress. We just got back from the uh, Missouri Great Homeschooling Convention. Next up is Orlando, the biggest homeschool convention in the world, is the end of April here, and or excuse me, end of May coming up, and we'll be going there. We have a series of 6 different conventions where we go and we distribute free literature, free books, free lesson plans, because that is our mission at the CO2 Coalition, and it is to provide us. And we go to these homeschool conventions, and their eyes get wide because we say it's free. Well, you go to these conventions, every table you go to, they're trying to sell you something. And we're not.
Yeah,
No, we're not selling. The only thing we're selling is facts. We're selling you science at no charge. We're giving it to you. And the people just, it's really heartwarming, and it makes you feel really good to see how the parents and the children respond, and they just love these. So it's one of the things I'm most proud of that we've done at the CO2 Coalition, and we're going great guns. Our next book will be Foxy the Fruit Bat Sleeps Well, and it's about a fruit bat. And if you see them, they got these eyes about this big, and that lives on the Maldives. And of course, Foxy has been told that his island will be underwater, in just a few years. And so again, we're able to use that to tell the truth about what's actually going on. And so heads are exploding when they're coming after our children. You're darn right we are. You've been after our
they've been
children
coming
for
after it
decades.
for decades.
Decades they've been coming after our children. And so what we're doing, we've got a mission. We're trying to bring only 48 out of the 50 states, only two of the states, North Carolina and Florida, include the scientific method as part of their science curricula. And we're trying to change that. It's been removed. Yes, that's right. 48 of the 50 states do not teach or include the scientific method. And it's criminal. It really is. As a scientist, so we through our work, we got it added to the North Carolina curricula last year. We're working closely in Texas to have that changed. Um, the big changes like that only occur maybe every 6 or 8 years in each
Yeah,
state. We got to keep on top of Pennsylvania, and let's that might be a great job for you and or some
I'm
other people.
already thinking it.
Yeah, let us know. We'll come. We have experience doing it. We can do that. Let's do that for Pennsylvania.
That just astounds me. I honestly, I wasn't aware that we don't teach scientific method. I kind of think a couple of my schools might still do it individually, but they're not. Uh,
And remove the NGSS,
wow.
new science standards. And the other thing, if you look at it, we attended the National Science Teaching Association meeting. Was May of last year or 2023, I think it was. And this is a big convention, big, big, big. And we attended it. We had a double booth. People were warmly received. And before we went, we read what the NSTA, National Science Teaching Association's policy statement was on climate change. And it was horrific, horrific. Nothing in there about scientific method, nothing about critical thinking. It was all consensus science, and it was really bad. And again, they're indoctrinating our children. And so we did a report on it, challenging the NSTA's position on climate change. And the day of publication was the first day of the convention. We rolled it out. We had hundreds of books we were handing out right and left to people. They're going, I can't believe they believe. And so the heads of the NSTA came down and he came to me and he says, you need to remove these materials. I said, why is that? I said, well, you're insulting. This is our convention. You can't come here and promote material that you disagree with us. And I said, well, I'm not going to take it down. He says, you're going to have to leave. I said, I told him to go pound salt. I'm not leaving. And he says, well, then
You
you
paid for
need
the
to get
booth.
out. And I said, so you're kicking us out. And he said, that's right. We're expelling you from the convention. No, I've talked to lots of people that have been in the convention world for years. They've never heard anything like the kicking a vendor out for promoting science. And so we walked out with our heads high. We walked out.
Amen.
It was actually quite empowering to be kicked out of that damn convention. And yeah, we look back on it in with great pride. That's what we're here for. We're here to stir things up and to tell the truth.
When you're
And
taking shots for the truth, it can just it emboldens me. I know it's great to hear that you guys were emboldened by it, and that's fantastic.
yeah, it was. Oh, I only wish. I wish I had my Beats speaker there. We could walk out playing. What's that Creedence song? Not Prodigal Son, but Fortunate Son. To
Yeah,
walk out blasting that and walk out proudly, which is what we did.
well, I'm sure the word got around because a lot of people the people who were standing there with the books probably ran into others that had it. Did you know that they just kicked these guys out?
Yeah. Well, actually, we just distributed our materials were such in demand. We just distributed the very last of all of our books and almost all of our materials when they showed up. So we weren't going to, yeah, that was okay. And we got a lot of press out of it. And they got a lot of negative press.
Right. That I hate. We hear it more and more all the time. People saying they're teaching children what to think, not how to think, and just eliminating scientific method. I mean, that if you want any more blatant example, you can't get any more blatant than that.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a large and growing homeschooling movement across the country.
Oh yes,
All of my grandchildren are homeschooled. Uh, they're all brilliant, by the way. But they're actually my granddaughter here read that book to me when she was 4 years old, almost five. But she read the entire book to me, and she only stumbled over two words: photosynthesis and veterinarian. She almost got photosynthesis. She says pahoto, and it was like okay, but you know she's reading the Chronicles of Narnia. She's now 7. It's about the book about this
oh
thick.
yeah, I'm familiar with it.
7-year-old reading the Chronicles of Narnia. And these homeschooling kids are just,
Oh, they're not going to. out of the park. Michael Ferris created the Patrick Henry College, and they're recruiting homeschool kids. Their first year competing against the Ivy League schools in the mock courts, they took first, second, third, fifth, and seventh places
I
against
love it.
Stanford, all these
Yeah.
others. The homeschool kids are really knocking it out of the park. And
Well, and I'm glad we're part of that now, and we're
yeah,
catering to them, and it really does it's gives you a warm feeling here to know we're doing good, and we're spreading the truth, we're spreading the facts, and we're helping good people out and teaching children the truth about what's happening.
um, when do you want to touch a little bit about Governor Shapiro and before him Governor Wolf on the Reggie, how that's going to impact the people of Pennsylvania? You wrote an
Yeah,
excellent article on it, but I'd like you to, and I'll put the link to that.
yeah, I'm a couple. I wrote a lot about it back in the day when we were fighting it. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is an initiative of it's a good consortium, I think 10 or 12 northeastern states.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania was planning to go into it. It's basically it's a carbon tax or carbon fee. Uh, in Pennsylvania, they said, "Oh no, it's not a tax, it's a fee." You know the details of the legal battle
right.
going.
And the
And
Commonwealth Court has said that it is a tax, and now Shapiro's going further down the road with the court system. But the impact on that to
it'll
the consumers here in Pennsylvania.
yeah, it'll increase your cost of electricity for sure. That's its stated goal. It's it's designed to increase electricity costs coming from coal and natural gas fired plants. Of course, you've got one less coal-fired plant today than you did last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, that was destroyed over at Homer City, the biggest coal-fired plant that had
Yep.
decades of useful life left. It's, why did they have to destroy it and blow it up? It's because when people wake up, like under Donald Trump, it would be easy enough to get that thing fired right back up. But if you blow it up and implode the whole thing, level it, you don't have a chance to do that. I guess I don't want to go political, but it's kind of like cremating the body of an attempted assassin within a week after the attempt. You wouldn't want to have that guy hanging around, and they don't want these coal-fired plants hanging around, so they implode them and they pave them over. I think they're going to put up a natural gas fired facility there, but
Yeah, it won't be able to produce the same number of megawatts. And I love my
and
gas guys, but I love my coal guys too.
yeah,
Uh,
the gas guys, they frustrate me to no end. I'm not going to name anybody like the head of EQT. I would never do that, but you know, they went on a war on coal a few years ago,
yes.
and it was. I don't think I'll be invited back to his barbecue anytime soon, uh, but the people like that, they want the crocodile to eat them last. They didn't realize. Now, times are changed. Times are changed now under this new Trump administration. But if that hadn't happened, they were going to come after natural gas next. There was
Absolutely, they were.
a war on coal. There was a pending war on natural gas, and it was going to be all electric and all windmills and all solar. And that's just, you and I both know that's wrong. And so it's Reggie. What it would do is increase the cost of electricity. There are some people now, though, that are saying, well, and what was passed under the Biden EPA was, or actually it's Department of Energy, was that they were going to impose these new power plant regulations that you could continue operating, but you had to strip the CO2 out of the stream. Well, we've done that. I used Dr. Sapoyan. We did a paper on that, and we researched it. If it costs almost $1 billion to put up the material on that coal plant. So it's really, really expensive. And it's very energy intensive just to do carbon capture for coal plant, for the natural gas plant. It takes 24% of the electricity generated to do the carbon capture. And so not only is it just expensive, it's unneeded, but you're consuming huge amounts of electricity that will have to come from somewhere else. And we've got these huge new needs uh, now with AI centers and also Bitcoin. I mean, you may not have heard too much about
Yeah.
data mining is hugely energy intensive. And I was in Texas 2 weeks ago talking, and they were talking there about that it actually these AI centers need to shut down periodically to kind of recalibrate and rethink. And it might be for half a day or a day, and then they charge back up. I didn't realize that. And so what they're saying is, well, we'll build these Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't need to run all the time. They run when it's most cost effective. And so if that goes down, we can, oh, now we're going to start mining Bitcoin and use electricity, if you're going to have a natural gas fired plant. And it just doesn't make sense. It's harmful for the people of Pennsylvania. And what we find with RGGI, what happened to the other states in New England, New York, New Jersey that enacted RGGI, the greenhouse gases didn't stop. They just got transferred over to neighboring states that didn't have RGGI, like West Virginia or Ohio. If you have an energy intensive business, then you've got to then what you need to do is move out of state, go someplace where you have lower electricity
That or
costs.
buy a nuclear power plant's energy supply. That's exactly what AWS, Amazon Web Service is doing. That buying up in Berwick there. I think that's the one that Amazon's after. But yeah, they signed an agreement and they're taking all the power that's there. And in the meantime, we almost did what Texas did when the grid shut down. In that when yeah, sorry. Yeah, we almost did what happened with over the winter. We were within a couple hours if it hadn't things hadn't changed because the increasing reliance on wind and solar, we were looking at rolling brownouts or blackouts.
Yeah. Yeah, it was coming and it still is coming, but it looks people have wised up now, hopefully under the Trump administration, people are waking up to realizing that we can't run Pennsylvania, we can't run America on solar and wind alone. We need reliable, abundant, affordable energy. And it's that reliable, abundant, affordable energy that we're going to be needing there. And solar and wind are none of those things. And I have to apologize to you if we've had landscapers show up outside my window. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but no,
No,
okay. Uh, and I can barely. It's a sound technology called CRISP, KRISP, that I'll recommend. It's works wonderfully. And so yeah, Reggie's bad. It's sitting right now, I think, at the Pennsylvania Supreme
Supreme
Court,
Court, yes.
and we've been waiting. We heard that it was going to be a year ago last October that they were going to rule on it, and here we
Mhm.
are still waiting.
Yeah. Well, our time is just about up. You mentioned about your education outreach, but what are some of the other areas where we can get and where people who are listening and watching can get in touch with you and the CO2 Coalition and some of the other partners?
Our resource, the website is co2coalition.org, co2coalition.org. And so we've had just explosive growth. It's been incredible, both in membership of our esteemed members. We've got now hired my 15th employee. There were two when I started, and that was in 2021. And so we've just we'll continue to publish going forward. We're going to be starting a podcast soon and a webinars. Uh, we continue growing and being more and more effective. And so go to co2coalition.org or for the learning materials, co2learningcenter.com. Go look for Chloe the Clownfish on Amazon. And then, of course, if you want my new book, which is up here, uh, just search for two words, convenient warming, and you'll get right to it.
All right.
And
Well, Greg,
thank you so much.
it's been a number of years, but like I said, back when I was in the House where we had that hearing that you knocked it out of the park then. You've done it again today. I'm really grateful for you and the people you've been able to come alongside for being there and it's not just my gas and oil guys or my coal guys. You're there for every single one of my constituents, whether they like it or not. You're there to help keep their energy costs low, also to help ask them the questions that will get them looking in the proper direction, which is something that we need to do more of in the society instead of just responding to a bunch of propaganda.
It is. And thank you for all you do.
Again, I'm grateful to be to step alongside you guys and be a partner in this fight. And I want to thank you again, and God bless.
Thank you, sir.